I'm going to do a talk about building a programming environment for privacy. Quickly, just to make, I just want to do a quick thing of make sure you're in the right room. So set the right expectations. We're going to talk a little bit about the motivations for privacy, at least for me. I've been losing sleep over log4j since 20 years ago. I wrote some code with log4j, and I still have no idea how I would prevent the compromise of privacy that all of that log4j happened. We still don't have the tools. And so I was really, really motivated to think about how do we start to have tools that we can use to prevent those types of attacks in the future. The second thing is really about sandboxing packages. So thinking about as we build software, our packages are a sandbox. We default deny. We kind of default deny as a pattern anyway, and that's kind of standard in the industry. And so I want to make sure we all have that capability when we're building software. I built an environment just for this. And I think that the reason that we should really care about privacy, because privacy is a human right. And so it's worth putting a little bit extra effort in how we build software. And finally, I'm going to do a little example of how default deny can be applied to a Python application and see what that kind of, just a quick code example. It's going to be 6 lines. Don't panic. Be very simple. And then just sort of how that applies and what that might look like as we move into this new exciting world. Oops. Okay, so what I'm not going to talk about, this is not production ready. Install this and magically you will have privacy. It'll block all your dependencies. This is a configure thing. This is a path forward. It's going to have some trade-offs, but I think those trade-offs are worth it for what we get. First, I just want to be super honest and say I'm a fraud. I am a privacy programmer at a security conference. So I'm really passionate about privacy, but hopefully you are too. Hopefully solving privacy problems also solves security problems. I've been doing this for 24 years, so I've been creating privacy code out there, problems for security people for 24 years. So, I hope I'm not alone, and there's other people out here who write code and actually are also causing problems. Future employment. I used to be a CTO at a healthcare startup, and that's where I really got passionate about the concerns around, I don't really know how to build software that has good controls for privacy because the internet happened. Okay, so it's the end of so if you're still here, great, thank you for staying, all you nice people. This is my first talk, so I'm a little nervous. So just a quick question, who here trusts the internet? Can anybody here trust the internet? I mean, we're at a security conference, if you raise your hand, I'm a little concerned. This is sort of a debated question, I'm keeping my hand up because I know that this is true. It's okay. Next question. Have you written any code or a script or anything where you had a dependency? You can raise your hand here, put your hand up. You know where this is going. It's okay, it's almost over. We have 20 more minutes and then, stretch out. You go ahead and make yourself known. It's okay. I'm not recording any of this. Hi, people at home. Okay, so, couple more questions, just small little questions. Do you trust your dependency now and forever in all future updates till breach do you part? Anyone? Yes? No? Okay. Your hands are starting to go down. What dependencies? What about your dependencies? We call those transitive dependencies. So the things you depend on, so the software you depend on that downloads the software, that downloads the software, and all the way down. Do you trust all that code out there? Do you trust these dependencies with your hard drive? You shouldn't. Yes, the right answer is no, but I have to build software. What about S3 buckets? Anybody have access to S3 buckets, either through the web or any other way? Yeah. Production databases? Anybody have access to production databases? So your dependencies have access to your databases. Okay, so just quick level set. I'm a privacy person. I want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, or the security black hole that is. I was listening to a podcast and I heard this on Risky Business, and it just kind of blew my mind that we have kind of left the solar system in our vulnerabilities. And I think, I don't want to ignore security, but I do want to focus on privacy. And so I'm going to make a little case for privacy here. These are interesting problems, and we should definitely solve these. Like, we should, can you still hear me? I feel like, yes, okay. These are interesting problems, we should solve these. I don't think things are gonna get better anytime soon based on what I hear. So good job security for everyone here, not so good for everyone at home. So in those massive, huge things, and I know you can't read this in the back, I did a quick Google search about breaches on data. 2 things came up. You can do this too. I'll just read the top one and kind of give a little quantification. So maybe security vulnerabilities are in the trillions or billions or whatever numbers that we can't really comprehend. But I have no affiliation to this. This is just a random Google search. I found this out. I didn't even know how this is breached. But here in Oregon, we had 1.7 million clients breached, data breached, healthcare data breach. That's 40% of the population. So there's like people in here whose data was breached if you live in Oregon, statistically. This is what failure looks like. In case you're wondering, this is it. This is privacy failure. Next. Okay, so I just want to kind of put in the context, this is a human scale problem. Every privacy breach we have is a human somewhere that has potentially been harmed. It's not just data in some huge warehouse or some company that has no face or has an X or whatever. It's actually people. And so I think that there's a moral obligation to think about this. They've given us their trust with their data, and we have not been able to protect it. And so we should have a little bit of ethical, ethical motivation. This is a great, I just found this out, this is like August 3rd, I read this blog. And this is perfect because there was malicious, so Log4j was sort of accidental. A feature was added, and the thing that's keeping me up is like, oh, how much code out there has been breached because I added Log4j 20 years ago, and then they added a feature at some point where you could get shell access, and so that's like keeping me up at night. But then I realized there's also malicious intent now. So now, as a threat actor, some previous talks did a great example of showing what good is a threat actor. I can just deploy a module somewhere that's got a great name and that somehow gets included in one of those dependencies, and now I can just read your hard drive. In fact, this particular attack was for developers or data people who use Python, data and analysts, because they don't have access to sensitive data or anything. Sorry, sarcasm. Anyway, only 75,000 downloads. So not really a big deal in the hundreds of millions, but to me, still. So privacy breach, just through dependencies. Yeah, so let's not trust the internet. Let's sandbox our packages. And so I think there's a pattern that we see everywhere, and this is in IP tables, it doesn't really mean it. This IP tables command just says block everything that comes in. That's the default behavior. And I've done some research on the prior work in this. There's Capsicum, which is FreeBSD, and OpenBSD pledge, and there's Linux stuff, lots of Linux stuff. And they all default to deny. Do not give access to data. And my assertion is that we need to sandbox our packages or our dependencies in the same exact way. We deny everything. This is kind of us developers. If you manage, anybody here developer or deal with developers know what this stuff. Do you know what this stuff is? This import stuff, where we package our code, where the magic happens. This is where the Log4j stuff lives. I mean, these are specific examples of Java and Ruby and Python or whatever. We share our code via these libraries, and sometimes we publish this stuff up on the internet, and then other people get to use it. This has become now, and when I started programming, this was not true. Dependency management wasn't considered a language feature, but Rust and Zig and all the new hotness all have dependency management built in. which is awesome because 94% of the code that you ship is a dependency. So most of the code you run, you didn't write, or we don't write, which means it's someone else's code that we got on the internet, and we know that we trust the internet because it's such a good place where everything's secure on the internet, right? So anyway, what I'm trying to say here is just like this is the place for us to manage our dependencies. This is the place to put controls. Yes. So we have enormous power with this one line of import something. In this particular case, is a Python piece of code I snatched out, and I'll walk through it a little bit later. But the point is that we can import a socket and we connect to anywhere on the internet. We can copy our entire hard drive. We can do whatever we want just with that one import statement. And our transitive dependencies can also do that too. So a little risk for the risk people. This seems a little sad and wrong. So I think we should be responsible developers, responsible security. I think this is kind of a blue team. I'm getting used to security words, and I guess I'm a blue team person, not a red team person. So this is blue team candy. So any blue team candy people, let's only constrain ourselves to this package, this dependency is allowed to go to this host on this port, and it can read and write in the socket. So you can't just connect to anywhere on the internet. The best time to figure this out is when you write the code. Not like 10 years later, when you're like, hey, does that module talk to hacker1.com? It's like now. It's like right when you add the dependency is a good time to add your controls. Yeah, and this is, again, like, I think this is an example of what I'm sort of pitching is like, hey, let's just get some controls, whether it's Terraform or whatever management. The idea is that. Okay, so how are we doing on time? Oh, I'm a minute. I think one thing I would just sort of, before I go into the demo and talk a little bit about Python, I want us to think about divorcing the idea that we sometimes have in our heads from any code can access any data. So we build software and we bring in packages, but not every piece of code should access every piece of data. But in a process right now, when you import something, it can access all your data. It can access all your requests, it can access all your databases. We gotta stop thinking that way, that once I am part of the software, I get access to everything. And so I'm sort of trying to convince the change of mind. I feel like this is this audience is like cool with this. This is a cool idea to you guys. Okay, so Python, so I built the whole programming environment. I wanted to take some of these lessons learned and try it with Python and kind of just show you what that looks like. This will be interesting because the terminal's over there, but why Python? I think the first thing, it's very popular, it's a very familiar environment. People probably have Python scripts, security uses it a lot. It's easy to say. The other thing is that I think this concept could very easily be applied to existing code bases. So if you have a legacy app from 5 years ago, you could easily say, hey, look, I don't necessarily want the database module to also be talking to, say, an external website. You could easily add controls into existing systems, or at least monitor and slowly add controls over time. So I think the idea here is that we don't just have like, hey, we're just gonna build new software. It's like, hey, we're gonna add controls, and we're gonna add controls to everything. Any questions while I get this ready? Everybody okay with this? Any of you upset about this? Software engineers are gonna be like hating me soon if they find out I do this, because they're like, you want us to do what? Okay, so what I'm going to do is just show you a little bit of that Python code. We'll just walk through it real quick, line by line. Taking this again. So the first part, I wanted to make this very explicit. You can do more magic here, but I didn't want it to be super explicit for the purpose of education. And in this case, I'm just going to import Sndl, which is the project that I call, it's my sort of Sndl, it's just my code name for the project that adds controls to all of the I/O. So I want to control all I/O, and so since I'm a privacy person, I care about data access. A security person probably care about other things, but I'm not really a security person. Or I kind of fake it a little bit. with my friends. So you import a socket and you want to create a connection to localhost. Port 8080, I want to send a little data, I want to receive a little data, I want to print a little data. That rhymed. I didn't plan that. That was actually pretty good. So that's it. So that's all going on. Is this, everybody kind of follow this? Yes? Simple? Cool. Yes, I use Vim. Okay. Yeah, I'm old. So let's just run this program. Simple, should just work. And the first thing we see is it failed because we didn't have any controls. We denied all. We did the right thing happened here. There's no controls configured. Did something change? No. Okay. There's no controls configured, so it should fail. We have no configuration. Deny all. We try to load our config. There's nothing. Yes, this is exactly what we should see. Future selves, right? If back in 30 years ago, you're like, hey, here's my server. It doesn't have a firewall. I've got my database up in clear text. Just telnet in and no. Today we think no, that's not going to happen. Like no, bad idea. I hope in 30 years we're like, yeah, do you remember when we didn't have controls over our package management and we just trusted all the code on the internet and just downloaded whatever and it was fun? I just hope that is the future. So first of all, let's use controls, and I'm just going to give a simple example. That config that we had up there, there we go, autocomplete. Here it is, just saying, hey, you can connect to localhost. So assuming my bash history is, I'm going to have to, for you people in the back, oh, I can't really figure out how to give, all right, well, I'll just do it this way. For you people in the back, all I did here was I ran it, but I passed it an environment variable with the configuration. Just like if you had a Docker file, here's your configuration, here's your payload, here's the config. This time, it sort of doesn't like me again because apparently I didn't configure port 8080 in my controls. So let's take a look and see what's going on with that. Let's take a look at our code. Oh, whoops, sorry about that. So port 8080, well, that isn't right. So what happened?
Your port was 2100.
Thank you, thank you. All right, I'm gonna buy you a beer later, perfect. All right, so 80, 2100, let's see. Yay, it worked. Hopefully this was very clear that that worked. I know it's a surprise. Thank you for the port number. Okay, so we've seen what it's like to add controls. We've seen that we can add controls to packages. We don't have to live in this horrible world. Just in summary, oh, good. I'm sort of on time. Just a quick summary. Privacy failure is a lived experience. We are now in the privacy lived experience. This is not a thing. Breaches are happening all the time. Now, they're not all because we didn't control our packages. Social engineering, there's lots of reasons for that. But I think it's important to remember that this is like humans all over now experience privacy breaches. And I think we have to think about how can we make changes to make this better. This can't be the normal. There is no free lunch, okay? So just like, hey, there's no magical thinking. We're gonna have to manage configuration. We're gonna have to manage these controls somewhere. Like, there's something we have to do here. We can't just kind of sit by and just sort of be like, oh, well, we'll have another virus scanner, Docker vulnerability, something will fix this somewhere else and down the pipeline. We have to start thinking when we're building software about privacy.
ChatGPT will save us.
Yes, it totally will, because it's like AI has never been racist or bigoted or wrong or statistically inaccurate. We've never had that problems. It's 99% of the time, and so every 100 times, it will give you a privacy breach piece of code. Isn't that great? So thank you for that. Oh, but there's hope, yeah. So I think there's hope. And quick That's it for me. I just want to thank for people who gave me feedback on my practice talk. I want to thank BSides people. My first conference since COVID. It's so nice to be with humans again. It's also just everyone for coming and listening to me gab. Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question. I just want to point out before I repeat the question that it's not a plant because he asked a node dependency question. So I just want to be clear because that is like the scary one. So the question is that I just started a new node project. It downloads all these dependencies. You have a dependency file. Why don't you add the controls right in the dependency file? You don't need a new file. You don't need a new thing. So I think inherently, if you're not doing anything dangerous, I think the part of this is a little bit of how we're going to change our code. So if we're going to make a connection or do I/O, well, there may be certain code that does that, and other code that we just pass that information to. So there may be a little bit of, we may rethink about how we do dependencies a little bit. There's probably a little influence there. But just assuming what you're saying is true, then yes, you are going to have to go through and justify every single package that needs access to those humans that have entrusted you with your data, that yes, you need to do that work. That is part of the job. So I think the answer is, if you have tons of dependencies that are all over the place, accessing all kinds of things, you're going to be a little sad for a little while until you sort that out. But that is the fiduciary or responsibility of being entrusted with data about humans. At the end of that, you have a good understanding of what you're doing. What's crazy is when you add monitoring to this, and so you know what packages are doing reading and writing of what data, and now if that behavior changes, okay, maybe there's something that went wrong. You know, maybe some purple team person or red team person messed with you. In the back in the blue, and there's another blue in the back, but totally a plan. I'm really glad you asked that question. So not a plan, I'm just kidding. So the question is for C or compiled languages, you know, how do we... C modules in Python. C modules in Python, how do we deal with that? And I think it's a great question. I think that, so there's two answers to that question. One is the control type stuff that I'm talking about could easily be pushed even lower, like enabled into Capsicum and sec, I get Linux, EB, about what and whatever Linux thing is doing today, because it changes, but all of the OS level, OSs already have this capability. It's really hard to use, it's really low level, and it's really complicated. But we can use these high level controls and push those down to the low level and provide these guards also. So the answer sort of is the key is to get to a point where I can make those lower level API calls to block things like C modules in Python. Is that sort of, yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's a little bit of so I'm monkey patching, like one of the tricks you can do is monkey patching. You can also actually, a number of these things, there's an earlier talk that sort of talked about tricks with this, and that's sort of the tricks that I've used with the C modules is I just swap out the C API calls. So I just proxy, so I just say, hey, instead of using the C socket call, anyway, there's a little person in the middle trick with this. So yes, we're gonna have to go through and patch a ton of code to make this all happen. I'm sorry, in the very back with the, no question? I'm moving way left. 1 second. A lot of blue shirts today. I don't know what it is. Does everybody wear a blue shirt? It's like BSides? Okay, so here in the middle, almost the middle, yes. How much of this should be static analysis? So how much of this could be solved by static analysis? I agree. I think a lot of it could be. A lot of it could be exactly that. And how we might actually build the initial version of our control file might just be, let's do static analysis and generate a file. Now let's review that and make sure that's correct, okay? Because in staging might be different than production, might be different than dev. So we're gonna have to have some per environment changes. But I also think static analysis is a way for us to do our compiled languages, so we can wrap our compiled languages with these kind of hooks so that those also have the same, you get the same behavior for dynamic languages as you get compiled languages. I think dynamic languages is a place to start because it's easier, but eventually static languages. So let me just rephrase the question maybe in a shorter version, if I can. If I'm using a compiled language, I already know all the APIs, the I/O that I'm using. Why would I do this? Is that sort of the question? How do I balance the amount of time? Why would I invest all this time in it since I already know what it is? I think we need to stop doing that. I mean, I don't know, like, how do we balance the privacy concerns? I think we have to stop pretending like using an external module is safe. It's just not safe anymore. Like, I can give you some links if you want to go download some cool software, and I'll totally own your computer, right? But you wouldn't do that. But yet you go and you say, oh, cool, I'm using Java or Go, and I'll just get whatever transitive dependency. It doesn't matter it's statically compiled. Right? That is untrusted code that can access anything you can access in that process. It's trickier, it's harder with static languages, but if there's an update, you don't really know what's in that update. Do you read all the updates? Actually, let me ask you a question. Do you read every single update of every transitive dependency you have? He's shaking his head no. So then how do you trust your code?
Do you know what packages you have?
Do you even know what packages you have?
In general, yeah.
In general? Okay, good. So I think that's great. That's a good example. Do you know what packages you wrote 5 years ago in that software that's running? I think you're with me, but I think it's a good question. It is, I think there's really big challenges with certain languages, and it's a huge assumption change. Like, it's a cultural change. I think someone earlier, the keynote, we talked a little bit about culture.
It's an architectural change.
It's an architectural change. Oh, it is time for this all to come to an end. You guys have a great time. Thank you very much.